Hello and welcome to the Gonzales Mitchell Show. I'm Clay Mitchell. Patrick's not here today. He's on assignment. However, we have a great guest today. It's Carroll County State's Attorney Haven Shoemaker. Welcome, Haven. How are you today?
I'm glad to be here, Clay.
Haven, tell us a bit about yourself, how long you've been in the state's attorney's office, and anything you want to about your personal political background.
All right. Well, just by way of background, I guess I've been practicing law for 32 years now. I guess since 1992.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always find that interesting. They say you're practicing law or you're practicing medicine. I guess you never get it right. I guess that's why you're always practicing. But yeah, and I've got almost 30 years in elected office, I guess. Um, I got elected to the little town where I live in Carroll County called Hampstead, Maryland. I got elected to the town council back in 1997. And I did 6 years in that job. And then they elected me for some reason. They elected me mayor. I did that for 8. Then I got elected Carroll County Commissioner. I did that for 4. That was an incredibly thankless job. I wouldn't wish on anybody. Um, when I was in high school, I had a job scrubbing toilets. That may have been a worse job than being
May
county
have.
commissioner.
May
Yeah,
have.
may have been. And then the good people of Carroll County sent me to the House of Delegates. I did that for 8. When I left there, I was the House Minority Whip, which is the number 2 Republican in the House of Delegates. And then I got elected to this job as state's attorney. And I took office in January of 23. So I've been at it for 19 months, something like that, 20 months.
So what's going on with your office? What have you been doing for the last 19 months?
Okay. Well, I mean, it's this is a job that's unlike any other job I ever had. When I practiced law, I did a lot of criminal defense work. So I sleep a lot better at night being on this side of the aisle than I was on that side. And one of the pledges that I made to the good people of Carroll County when I was running for this job is that I thought our mission was simple, and that is to work with the brave men and women of law enforcement to get the bad guys off the street. And that's simply stated. That's what we're supposed to do as the prosecutors for Carroll County. I've got an office of 22 attorneys. I've got 34 support staff. So, it's an office of 56 folks. We're the largest law firm in Carroll County when you look at it that way. We serve a population of 173,000 people. That's what we have in Carroll County. We do everything from malicious destruction of property to murder. We do driving on a suspended license to rape. We do it all. So I think last year, I got those stats here. How many
Okay.
cases do we have? Oh, here it is. We did in circuit court. We did 1,863 cases last year. And
Yeah.
as a consequence of those cases, we did over 6,600 hearings in district court, which is the lowest court, that handles misdemeanors and traffic offenses and things of that nature. We handled almost 4,000 cases. So
Wow.
it's a busy office.
Because a lot of people, especially in the metro areas, when they think of Carroll County, they think it's this bucolic farmland stretched county, and you all have no problems there. Uh,
Yeah, that's
but
not
it,
entirely true. I
yeah,
tell folks all the time. In fact, I said something to somebody yesterday. You don't have the full flavor of what goes on in the county unless you hung out with me for a day over at the courthouse. Then you'd see a little slice of Carroll County that most people don't see. And yeah, we're probably the safest county in the state of Maryland in terms of overall crime, but we have crime, and we take that seriously in my office.
has the crime increased? I guess since the turn of the centuries, has there been any trends that you see that have formed that has caught your attention?
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, there is something that I've seen that's particularly disturbing to me. I mean, I guess primarily since the pandemic, we have prosecuted a lot of child pornography cases. And it
Wow.
just, yeah, it's odd. People sit at home on their computers, or they're on their iPhones or whatever, and they get themselves embroiled in legal trouble looking at stuff that is against the law. And
Wow.
it's a really strange phenomena, but we have a fair amount of that here, and it's very weird. We average about one homicide a year. This year, all of a sudden, I mean, I think we've had three. So that's a little peculiar. When I came into office, we had six homicide cases in the pipeline. Now, a lot of those have been accumulated and were in the pipeline because of court delays associated with COVID lockdowns
Right.
and all that sort of thing. So we've whittled that down now, but we've had about three this year, which is peculiar.
Now, is the crime sort of bubbling up on its own, or is it migrating, say, from Baltimore City into Carroll County?
Um, in the realm of narcotics, drugs, and drug dealing, which is something that I also take a dim view of. We have had a lot of spillover activity, I guess, associated with that coming from the city and Baltimore County. So I mean, we're close. From my house in Hampstead, the Inner Harbor's 25 miles away. So we're close by. Even though we are relatively bucolic in the overall scheme of things, we're still part of the Baltimore metropolitan area,
Mhm.
and we see the effects of that. I can tell you there's something else that has been disturbing to me, and I see it recurring again and again, particularly this calendar year. And that's the number of folks who have been committing crimes, have been charged with crimes, who have ICE detainers. We see a lot of
Wow.
that here now. And we never had that phenomena before. So my instincts tell me that is largely the result of the influx of illegal immigrants coming across our porous southern border. So
Now,
we're seeing a lot of that.
with ICE detainers, do you cooperate with the feds, or are you prohibited from doing that because of some law?
Now, Carroll County is not a sanctuary county. We cooperate fully with ICE. So if we get notified by ICE that there's a detainer on an individual, after whoever that is serves his or her sentence, ICE takes over from there and does what they do.
Good work. Good for you. I've seen you recently, I guess the past 2, 3 months, especially on the news, talking about juvenile justice and the problems that your office is having with that. Could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, I'll point the finger of blame where it belongs, and that's the legislature.
Hmm.
And I was down there for 8 years, so I saw it up close and personal. It's radically different than when your dad was the speaker, Clay.
Hmm.
There's been a lot of criminal coddling from the Maryland General Assembly, sadly, and as a result of that, I guess we're people all across the state are reaping the dividends of that. Yet it started when I first got down there with the Justice Reinvestment Act,
Right.
where they and Republicans and Democrats were behind this thing. Larry Hogan pushed this thing, and what it did was it reduced a lot of mandatory minimums. It inhibited prosecutors from hamstrung us, I guess, from going after folks who violate the conditions of their probation that were assigned by the court. It's done a lot of damage, and they said at the time when they were pushing this thing that it would save the taxpayers 30 some $1 million a year because there'd be fewer people behind bars and all this nonsense. And it's really not worked out the way that they intended it for it to work out. And I think I was one of 7 Republicans in the House of Delegates who voted against that thing. And I'm glad I did because, time has shown that I was right. And then in 2022, they passed juvenile justice reform.
Right.
And what that did was, if you were under 10, if a juvenile was under 10, they couldn't be charged with anything at all. If they were 10 to 12 years old, they could only be charged with crimes of violence. And the crimes of violence were enumerated. What you could actually charge a 10 to 12-year-old with was. Car theft, of course, wasn't one of them. That wasn't considered by the legislature to be a crime of violence. They had as part of that felonies could be disposed of by DJS, without any input from the local state's attorney at all. They could just can the case at intake. So the only time that they would have to consult with the local state's attorney was if it was a crime of violence. And by the way, car theft was not a crime of violence. So you had the situation in Baltimore County that got a fair amount of news where you had an 11-year-old who was stealing, 13 or 14 cars, and they couldn't do a damn thing. So they couldn't do a thing because of the constraints of the law. They had as part of that juvenile justice reform that, if it was a piddling offense, something not terribly serious like a misdemeanor, the maximum period of probation you could put this juvenile on would be 6 months. If it was a more serious crime, then you're looking at a whole year. Well, you can't do a lot to rehabilitate a juvenile offender in either 6 months or a year. So that law did not work out well at all.
Do you foresee any changes or adjustments to that law coming up, or do you think it's just going to
Well,
stay the way it is?
I'm happy to report that notwithstanding how criminal coddling the legislature has been in the last 10 years or so, they did make some tweaks to the law this past session. So in 2024, after they saw the disaster that they had created by the Juvenile Justice Reform Act in 2022, and after getting a lot of flack, not just from the state's attorneys across the state, which they did get a lot of flack from us, but they got the heat turned on them by the media, particularly Channel 45 in Baltimore,
Right.
WBAL radio. They spotlighted how soft this Juvenile Justice Reform Act that they had just passed like a year or so before was, and how juvenile crime had skyrocketed as a consequence. I mean, when you have juveniles stealing cars and they know that they can't be charged, then who's going to take advantage of that? Well,
Right.
adults are going to take advantage of that in connection with their criminal enterprises that they're running, and they're going to get juveniles to actually commit the offenses for them because there would be no consequences. So in 2024, the legislature made some tweaks. I'll call that juvenile justice reform. That's pretty much what it is. So they walked back some of the things that they had done in 2022. They made it so that now, if you're between 10 and 12, you can be charged as a juvenile with crimes like car theft, for instance. They expanded probation from, instead of 6 months to a year, instead of a year for more serious offenses, to 2 years. So and they provided a mechanism for local state's attorneys to be involved in the process early on. So I mean, those were tweaks that they made, and they were welcome tweaks. I think they should have gone farther than they did, but at least that's a step in the right direction. And again, I think that that's a reflection of the media attention that spiraling juvenile crime got, and I think it was also, in large measure, a response to constituent outcry. Patrick did that poll last year,
Right.
where he said that where he found that 80% of Black Americans, African American folks who are Democrats, said that the juvenile laws were entirely too soft and need to be
Right.
changed.
Right.
And I think that the leadership in the Maryland General Assembly heard that from their folks, in addition to the media scrutiny that they were under, and they acted accordingly. Now, sadly, what they didn't do, there were a few things that they didn't do. One thing is the Child Interrogation Protection Act that they passed a couple years ago, where law enforcement is hamstrung in their ability to interrogate juveniles who are under custody, who are in custody. So under the law that they passed a year or two ago, I guess 2 years now, juveniles are afforded the right to an attorney while they're being interrogated. So what defense attorney is going to tell his client, hey, yeah, go ahead and talk to law enforcement.
Exactly right.
Cooperate. I did that line of work, and I can tell you nobody's going to do that. Nobody's going to recommend that their client cooperate with law enforcement. And the sad part about that is, juveniles, even before this act was made a law, they had a right to counsel. And, they're given a Miranda warning under the Constitution and the Supreme Court precedent, just like anybody else was. But now they've taken it a step further and essentially said a juvenile can't waive the right to counsel. They have to have counsel. Even if their parents say, little Johnny, I want you to talk to law enforcement and tell them what you know. They can't waive it for them either. So that takes parents out of the process. And that is another law that the legislature really needs to take a hard gander at. And I don't think there's going to be an appetite to do that anytime soon. And that's sad. So that's where we are. And I know that looming on the horizon, this session coming up in 2025, there's going to be a push to do some more coddling, and have enacted this thing called a direct file, where all cases involving a juvenile would have to start in juvenile court as opposed to adult court, no matter how serious. Right now, there's a mechanism in the law that says, you can charge a juvenile as an adult under certain circumstances, and it can get sent down to the juvenile court, which is more user friendly, of course, for juveniles and soft, as it were. But you have to do a hearing and ask. Present why this case should be sent to juvenile court from adult court. The direct file idea would have all cases start in juvenile court. And that's extremely concerning, and it's extremely problematic, particularly as we've seen juvenile crime escalate across the state.
Well, Mr. State's Attorney, I want to have you back on the show, and the subject will be the return of the McDonald's McRib, because I know you're an expert in that. The clock on the wall tells us it's time to say goodbye, Patrick.
Goodbye, Patrick, wherever you are.
Right. Goodbye, Patrick. We'll see you soon. Thank you so much, Haven, Mr. State's Attorney. We look forward to having you back.
Sure thing, Clay. Anytime.